Good Friday, everyone. It is Dom time. Nate Benefield is the Senior VP of the Commonwealth Foundation, and I usually am almost always in lockstep with them. Maybe we'll be in agreement, but I told you this big ruling that came down, we've been predicting for years. It's unconstitutional, says a Republican rhino judge, in my view. She didn't say you're going to have to increase taxes to bring up the standard of education for these school districts that are horrible in many ways because they're mismanaged. But that's where this is going to go. Now, more conservative elements say, what about school choice? Well, is there a bigger fan than I of school choice? But I believe school choice only wins by smash mouth politics. Won't win any other way. Maybe I'm wrong. Let's go to Nate here on Talk Radio 1210. Hey, Nate, thanks for joining us. Where am I wrong about this?
Well, I think I don't know if you're necessarily wrong about the need for smash mouth politics to win on school choice. But as I look at some of the things in this lawsuit and the ruling, and as you said, it doesn't say they have to come up with more money. It says that, the legislature and executive need to work together and figure out a solution that is constitutional. But I'm reading, the judge said that, the only requirement imposed is that every student receives a meaningful opportunity to succeed. Now, I don't know how you can say a child has a meaningful opportunity to succeed while also saying the only option available to them is their local zip code assigned school that's failing. I think the only way to solve that is with school choice, that they have the option to go to the best school that fits their needs with the funding following them. I think, that's the solution that needs to be legislated. There's, some openness to that even from Governor Shapiro. But it even opens up, couldn't a parent sue basically based on this ruling and say, my child is being denied a meaningful opportunity. I need, a scholarship to go to a private school, or I need a charter school in the area or something to allow me to leave my failing school and get the option that actually serves and fits my needs.
So you're saying by this ruling, you think it's arguable that the ground rules have changed. I look at the people, this mob of left-wing fanatics who have pushed for this, and I look at the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. First of all, what I see, Nate, is an all-out attack on charter schools under the argument it costs too much. They're already making that argument. Second, they're talking about $4.5 to $5 billion more. What's the force out there, because the Commonwealth Foundation is a big player in this, that can push back against that effectively? Why have they not been able to do it before?
Well, and this is where I think they are, some of the left-wing groups and the groups that are advocating for this, and I even say these are taxpayer-funded lobbyists who are saying, well, trying to say the court ruling means that they need $4 billion more. That's not what it says. And really, when you look at the numbers, Pennsylvania is already among the highest spending states in the country, nearly $20,000 per kid. And if you think of that as a classroom of 25 kids, $500,000 for a classroom. That's what we're spending per kid in public schools, many of whom are failing, are delivering poor results. And you ask parents, and we've done polling on this and we've seen polling showing, yes, most voters say, hey, are your schools need more money? Yes. When you actually tell them, the average school spending $20,000 per kid, $500,000 per classroom, the average teacher salary is $72,000. Some of their attitudes change on that, and I think there needs to be better education of the public of how much schools are spending, even keeping in reserve funds that aren't going to help the kids. And that really, I think, makes the case for why we need education choice, where that funding follows the child and is directed to where the need is, and not simply to funding buildings and funding school districts.
All right. Now, Josh Shapiro, the great masquerader, his office filed an amicus brief in this, and it was very clear. Now, you could say, well, he's got a different responsibility. I think it's the same guy. His amicus brief was to push to this decision, and I don't think he was doing that with the teachers' unions backing to say, let's have school choice. So, Nate, he stuck his toe in the water, but it was just to make him a bit different. You really think deep down Josh Shapiro is going to be on the school choice side on this?
Well, that's it's the question that is the billion-dollar question out there, because Josh has supported, hey, we need more funding for public schools, and the supporter of public schools. He got the teachers union endorsement, but then he did come out and say, would support something like the Lifeline Scholarship Program to help kids in the lowest performing school districts, and he stuck by that. He was questioned about it, so that's what he believes. It remains to be seen. I tend to think people laugh at me because I'm a fan of pro wrestling and say, well, that's fake. But I take pro wrestling and campaign promises about equally as seriously. What people candidates say in the campaigns is much like what pro wrestlers say in their shtick. So I think that remains to be seen of how committed Josh is to actually supporting and pushing for school choice with his first budget coming up next month.
We're talking with Nate Benefield, Senior VP of Commonwealth Foundation. Nate, I could see it going this way, too. He plays at a little bit over here to technically say, the scholarships in some limited way that you talked about. And yet, maybe he doesn't put his thumb on the scales, but behind the scenes, they go for what I think they want, $5 billion more, and they want to take it from the suburban school districts and taxpayers. Isn't that the most likely scenario here?
Yeah, I think there's that push for that. I think, and you mentioned there was even talk of like, one of the ways to solve it is take money from charter schools. That doesn't make any sense. It doesn't even follow with what the court ruling was of the funding for the child being more equitable. It doesn't make sense to take it from charter schools, which get significantly less per student than school districts do. I do think one area there's probably is common ground with some of these groups, and Commonwealth Foundation is the way that we have funded school districts in the state. It had something called hold harmless, where districts get the same amount of money they got in the prior year regardless of enrollment changes. That has really benefited districts that have lost a lot of population, a lot of students, and districts that have been growing have been getting less per student. I think taking that down, which really does fly in the face of funding following the child, we think putting everything through a funding formula that is tied to student enrollment and the number of students, rather than what districts got 20 or 30 years ago, is the way to go. And I think that's probably the most agreeable where there's, I think, common ground to start from. But we think that needs to be expanded to, not just school districts, but the best educational opportunity for every single child in the state.
Well, the head of the Philadelphia Teachers Union says Philadelphia can expect, he thinks, $1 billion from this. But to your point, how could a school district failing this miserably and down in enrollment get that money?
Yeah, that's, I think, a great question of why, should we have a system that rewards failure, gives more funding when schools fail, and really isn't tied to enrollment. And that's a big thing is this thing, the rumor, the mythology is funding cuts when really there's been funding increases, even increases in the number of staff and faculty, teachers, and administrators. But enrollment is down and has been declining for several years. But especially post-pandemic, we've seen enrollment declines. It really raises the question of funding and really the management of these schools, because I think with the declining enrollment, there's a lot of vacancies in school districts like Philadelphia where they have schools that are only 20% occupied, but they don't want to close them because of political ramifications. So I think there should be a lot more questioning simply than the idea of, we need more money, more taxpayer money. There needs to be a lot more distance. And the ruling even said that not all these solutions are financial.
I know, but what's the role? I don't think this happens overnight, which is a good thing. I think there's going to be quite a struggle here potentially. But if it ends up in the state Supreme Court, I think this is similar to them drawing the lines in the gerrymandering, where they want to jump in and actually manage the school budget.
Yeah, that's, I think, one of the fears a lot of people have, that our state Supreme Court has somewhat ignored the rule of law, tried to legislate themselves, and in past rulings from drawing the lines, have done it themselves. And I think that's one of, I guess, the silver linings of this ruling from Commonwealth Court that, they said it was unconstitutional, did leave it back. Well, it's just got to go back to the legislature and the executive branch to negotiate and figure it out. We're not going to tell you how to do that. I do have the fear that if it appeal to the Supreme Court will try and do their own thing, make up their own model, and hopefully that doesn't happen, because it really shouldn't. And really, judges are not expertise on how we fund and how we educate our kids, and shouldn't be.
Absolutely. Nate, where do we find you at the Commonwealth Foundation?
Our website, commonwealthfoundation.org.
Nate, thanks very much, and we'll talk again soon as soon as the budget starts up. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.